Fresh paint is made possible by Anchor Glass Container Corporation. When taste and freshness matter, Mother Nature has the package. From the sands of the earth, in a word, it's glass.
Hello, I'm Glenwood Sherry. Welcome to Fresh Paint, where we're going to show you how to decorate with paint just like the professionals. Now we're here in San Francisco, famous not only for the Golden Gate Bridge, which by the way is a never-ending painting project, but also for its stunning Victorian architecture. So why don't we look around and enjoy the view for a few moments, and I'll take you down and show you around. Now this great home is in the Italianate style. Now what makes something Italianate? Well, just look at the detailing. You'll notice that it has columns and colonnettes with the Corinthian capitals. It also has the heavy bracketed cornices, lots of geometrical details, and this great angled bayfront window. But you know what's interesting about the house is that when it was built in 1886, the style had really gone out of fashion. By that point, most of the homes were in the Eastlake and Queen Anne style. But the owners were very conservative. They felt more comfortable with a home that was more common, say 10, 20 years before. In fact, the house next to it, which was built about a dozen years earlier, is in the same style. Well, let's go inside and I'll show you around. Paul, how you doing?
Hey, Glenn.
Well, thanks for meeting with us today.
Yeah, pleasure.
This is Paul DeShare. He's an interior designer and historian here in San Francisco, and the owners asked Paul to take some time out and show us around the house. So, you want to give us a tour?
Let's get started. There's a lot to see.
Sounds wonderful.
This is the room I really wanted you to see.
Oh, this is a great room. I love this. This is wonderful, but I don't know, maybe it's just me, but doesn't it seem a little busy?
Well, to the modern eye, I think it's probably more ornament than people are used to. But if you look at it and let it sink in, I think you'll find it sort of
All works?
all works together.
Well, I know that the Victorians were really passionate collectors, and they were very class conscious.
That's true.
It was really important for them that their houses, their interiors kind of reflect it. So I guess this meant that the owner of this house was pretty important,
And probably like to entertain a lot too.
Yeah. But you're right, because I'm looking at this and it's amazing at how, as busy as the design is, it really does all work. Everything from the furnishings to the wall to this incredible ceiling, it all works together. I mean, it's a beautiful, especially the paint scheme. Paint scheme is gorgeous.
The room actually won a national award from the painting and decorating contractors.
Well, I've seen a lot of high Victorian, but this is going to be probably the prettiest I've ever seen. In fact, it's amazing how when you look at it, especially all the details, it's kind of like a giant oriental carpet. It's very complicated, and there's a lot of different elements going on, but it really does work together.
Somehow it does.
You have the sienna faux finished columns to make it look like the sienna marble, and that goes up into the multiple colors of the polychrome capitals, but then it just moves right up into the ceiling. You have these beautiful stencil patterns up on the wall that kind of carry into the ceiling.
Interesting that you think of them as stencil patterns, because in fact they are, but they're wallpaper.
Oh, that's wallpaper.
It's wallpaper. We have a combination of paint and wallpaper in this room, and the distinction is blurred intentionally because the wallpaper was intended to resemble stenciling.
Which the Victorians would have done.
Which the Victorians did. They did wallpapering too, but in this case the effects are purely stencil ones with a bit of hand painting in those corner fans.
I noticed also the ceiling medallions. It really looks like porcelain, like an old matte porcelain.
And the effect that you see there, I think, was inspired by hand-painted porcelain. It's a low luster, oil-based color wash that was applied to the various elements of that plaster medallion and highlighted with little bits of gold leaf. give it some sparkle.
Well, you know, talking about the gold leaf, I noticed that in very small amounts, the gold leaf is used throughout the room. Kind of pick up little highlights, you know, the light hits it, especially like in the doorway going into the dining room. You know, you have the elements, you have a little bit of the faux finishing, you have the pinstriping, the polychroming, you have the stenciled panels in the door, but you also have these nice thin lines of gold leafing, add a little bit of sparkle.
They activate basically what are architectural elements that have relief, but it pops them up a bit.
And it kind of makes you want to see what's in the other room,
It does.
right?
It does. You want to?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
I want you to see the other side of these doors
Oh,
to show you how different the effect can be with a different painted finish on the same door. This is a painted grained finish with a burled walnut look in these raised panels and straight graining on the sides, and it's original to the house.
oh, this dates from the 1880s? Oh, it's in incredibly good shape.
It really is.
You know, actually, that is a good point because we talk about this a lot on the show, about how you could take maybe 2 pieces of molding or 2 pieces of furniture, and by changing the color, you get 2 totally different looks. And here's a great example of that.
It really is. And the other thing about this doorway, which really shows up in the wood finish, is this sort of monumental architectural quality that
It's very
it has.
grand.
It is, and it has architectural forms that are restated from the facade. So it's kind of a nice,
Sort of like bringing the outside to the inside.
it's a nice complete design.
Yeah, it's got the same brackets and the same heavy pediment. But somehow, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that ceiling just, well, just doesn't seem to work, does it?
It's a work in progress.
Oh, so it's not done?
It's not done.
Oh, okay.
It's waiting. It's ornamental ceiling design, but it's in the works, and it will happen. This is a nice example of a small room that has an ornamental ceiling created by paper, a little bit of paper, and quite a bit of paint, and some vivid colors used in discrete amounts.
In fact, if you picture this room as it would have been used in the 19th century, with very pale gas light, the colors would not have been as bright. It would actually been a lot more subdued, and you would have to have the strong colors just to be able to see the colors.
That's right, or else the whole design would just look washed out.
Well, Paul had to leave for a little bit, but he made me promise to show you this room. Now, in most of your high-style Victorian homes, they set aside one space where they could indulge in their love of the fantastic and the exotic. This is one such room. Now, it uses a lot of different influences, but predominantly it's Turkish and Japanese. I like to point out 2 things they did with paint here. The first one is this pattern here. This is called l'incrusta. Now, what it is an embossed linoleum which is glued right to the wall. Now, usually this is used in the high traffic area, such as a staircase or a hallway. Here it's used for decoration. Now, once it's installed, they came in and they applied a coat of a bright red, then added a black varnish to give it some depth. It really looks like a very old embossed leather. Then to finish it off, they added a little bit of gold paint on the upper part to kind of give it a little bit of gold and to break up the overall pattern. Now, the second thing I'd like to show you is here in the ceiling. Now, Paul designed this incredible Japanese-inspired ceiling. It's all wallpaper, but I think that it's great how he brought the wallpaper up and blended it with the original ceiling medallion. You really can't tell where the paint ends and the wallpaper begins. That's something I think we need to keep in mind when we start to work with a blend of paint and wallpaper. There are numerous small bedrooms in this house, including this one. Now, this is done in the Victorian Japanese style. The Victorians were very fond of Japanese-inspired design, and there are some wonderful features in this room. Not to mention the fact the reproduction wallpaper used for both the ceiling and the border, and this striking paint scheme used for all the trim. The background is in an olive green with a brick and gold leaf accents. The silk draperies are original to the house, date from the 1890s. Most of the furnishings also are from the 1890s. The main feature of the room is the chandelier. It's a Japanese cast iron and gold gilt chandelier set off by the hand-painted medallion in the colors of the trim. You know, every time I think I have Victorian design figured out, sure enough it throws me a curve. And this is a great example of that. Now, normally in Victorian design, especially in this house, a lot of your patterns are based on geometrical or historical motifs. This is unusual. They use a nature motif. Now, usually that's not found until a much later arts and crafts or Art Nouveau pattern, but this is really remarkable. Now, the pattern complements the original tile and all the original fixtures. It's really quite rare to find these. The pattern works from both the pond to the wetlands to the forest motif. As it goes up higher, the patterns get progressively lighter and more delicate. Up against the ceiling, you have a soft field of flower serving as kind of like a crown molding. But in the skylight, you have this great stylized sun and star pattern. It really finishes the space off. This Grecian Revival bedroom has a ceiling decorated with both hand stencil details and wallpaper borders. The light backgrounds and muted earth tone colors point out that not every Victorian room is dark with bold colors. The gold gilt chandelier is original, as is the walnut bedstead. The wainscot and chair rail is a wallpaper reproduction of an original hand stenciled design. The woodwork still has the original dark wood graining.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey Paul, up here.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, I'm glad you can make it back.
Finally got back.
Well, you know, we've had such a great time, and I thought, well, what could be more appropriate in today's program than to be in this room?
Isn't it great?
Oh, I love it. It is the most spectacular room in the house. When you come in, you just feel almost overwhelmed by this incredible border. I mean, there's some great artwork in this house. I mean, there's some wonderful wallpapers and stencils, but this just leaves you breathless.
It does, and it's hard to believe looking at it that it's about 20 years old. And
Really?
It's an
Wow.
important landmark of the Victorian Revival, because the kind of work that you see here in this house is basically showing techniques and products that weren't available before the 1970s, and this was a real early example of that movement.
Oh, so in other words, like nowadays, if someone had a Victorian home, you could go up, maybe not this exact pattern.
There's a lot available today,
Yeah, like,
product-wise.
so you could go out and buy a border. You wouldn't have to stencil this.
You wouldn't have to, and if you could, it's an option, but there are many options today
Yeah.
for anybody restoring a Victorian house.
Well, you know, when I was doing some reading about the house, I noticed that you made some interesting comments. For instance, there's like 24 stencils went into doing this.
Incredible, but it's true.
And also, you know, it brings up looking at this, it actually illustrates a couple things that we had talked about earlier. First of all, again, like many of the smaller rooms, this doesn't have a crown molding. There's actually no molding in the ceiling or, you know, in the upper part of the wall.
And you don't miss it.
You don't. The pattern is so great, you wouldn't even know if there was molding up there. And the other thing is, when you have a really vibrant pattern, you have to balance it. You know, you have to give the eye some quiet places. Here in the center part of the ceiling, I'm quite sure the artist could have designed some really bold and some, you know, almost a busy pattern to fill in the space. But actually, there's a really nice, quiet rose white. It kind of gives the eye something to, you know, to rest on. You see all the strong patterns, and the eye just, wow, this is great. But then you have the nice quiet areas, and it kind of helps keep it in balance.
And it's a bedroom, and you want sort of a bit of rest for the eye.
Well, just like the dark green.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here with the dark green, you have, well, that's the same thing. It's a soft color, and it gives the eye a break. You know, you look up at the border, and you get excited by it, but it's nice to be able to look at something that's not quite so busy. You know, also, when I was going through these books, I came across a very interesting quote. It seems that the artist described this as Victorian with a vengeance. Now, that has got to be one of the best lines I've ever heard.
Great quote.
And it really does describe this.
It does, and it also describes something about the artist who said that. And his name was Larry Boyce, and Larry was really one of the first people to participate in the Victorian Revival. And his work was right at the very beginning of the movement to recreate appropriate ornament for Victorian houses. It was something that just wasn't available.
Yeah, really up until the middle 1970s, no one was interested in saving these homes.
It was a movement that was just getting underway at that time. And fortunately, people like Larry saw the potential of art form applied to an interior like this, and he made a pretty interesting, if brief, career doing this kind of work. Unfortunately for us, Larry died in 1992, and
Well, at least ways the work exists.
we lost Larry, but we continue to enjoy his work.
You know, I've often heard, especially as an artist, that, you know, the work reflects the artist. So I imagine Larry must have been quite a character.
He indeed was a character. And he had...
That little hesitation of yours really says a lot.
Well, there's just so many stories that come to mind for anybody who knew Larry, and even people that have heard about him.
Because he really was nationally known.
He became nationally known partly because of his eccentric mode of travel.
Oh.
It doesn't sound that eccentric, a bicycle, but
Oh, we all ride bicycles.
Larry decided, after an unfortunate incident with a plane crash which he survived, that he would
No longer
prefer
fly.
to take a bicycle. So Larry proceeded to use that as the main way he'd get around the country, and he became a kind of a fitness nut. And in addition to thinking of some way to earn his living along the way, he traveled about 250,000 miles over a period of 18 years. And
On a bicycle.
on a bicycle, and the way he funded his travels was, in essence, being an itinerant stencil.
Oh, so he would show up in the
Artist.
town and say, "Here I am," and
Literally,
and work.
he did that many times. And
Wow.
he'd walk up to the nice-looking Victorian house in some little town and knock on the door and say, "I'm Larry Boyce, and I'm a great stencil artist, and
And you need a stencil.
you need a stenciled ceiling or a frieze, and if you put me up for a few days, I'll..." So,
Well,
how he did it.
It's unfortunate he's no longer with us, because looking at just this one example, he was a really great artist.
And in this example, Larry adapted historic ornament that was based on the designs of Christopher Dresser, who was an important English designer whose work was published in the 19th century and became an influence on a lot of work that was done by others.
Do you know, as fantastic as the frieze is, there's really a lot of other design elements that, well, you have to really admire in this room. For instance, I think this is a wonderful architectural touch where they've taken, I guess that's an old silk damask, and have made a panel out of it. I mean, it's a great, it kind of like condenses the clutter.
The way it's used as a backdrop for the photographs, family mementos.
Kind of keeps the photographs from wandering all over the surface. And you know, this is really a spectacular bed. I mean, this belongs in a castle. It is so massive, especially with this headboard. Well, I tell you, you can't really walk into your average furniture store and find something like this, now can you?
The owners collected this style of furniture for better than 30 years.
And yet, you know, with the style, which is a Renaissance, Italian Renaissance revival, it really fits the house. And, you know, one of the things I've enjoyed about coming here is seeing not only the beautiful paint schemes and the wonderful finishes, but the owner has collected an absolutely incredible collection of furnishings. And I'd have to say that my favorite, and one that my wife would probably insist on taking home with us, is this settee. Now, the beadwork in this settee is, I mean, you just can't describe it. But from the condition of it, I don't think it's ever been sat in.
I think it's probably a piece that was off limits for most of its lifetime to prying hands, but
And little kids.
It was, it's a prized piece of handwork.
Now, this is all original, correct?
It's completely original to the frame, and that alone is unusual enough. But the quality of the beadwork and the needlework, and the way it's integrated into the design of the piece is pretty exceptional.
Well, it must have been some family's prized possession, because they kept it in just remarkable condition.
Makes you wonder if perhaps there was a whole parlor set of something similar.
And someone else someplace may have its match. And also in this house too, they've got a couple of other items that you don't normally find in this condition and in a house of this age, and that is the fireplace. Now the fireplace is cast iron, and the finish is a finish referred to as jasper. It's enamel and comes from the factory this way. But these fireplaces get painted so many times through the life of a house that very seldom do you come across one that either, has not been repainted or where the finish is, been almost completely worn off. This one is on almost perfect condition. Well, we've had a great time here, and there's a lot of wonderful books about Victorian. In fact, if you look around at enough books, you're going to find this room in quite a few of them. In fact, I think this has got to be the most published room in the United States. I mean, I have come across this in at least 6 different books, and the owners collected, let's see, there's a calendar, and there's even a jigsaw puzzle with this room on it. So, I think it's well worth the attention it's gotten.
I think it is. It's a landmark.
And, and not only is this room a landmark, but there are so many homes in San Francisco. It is amazing that you come in, you want to do a program, and you figure, nope, we just found too much. That means we have to do a second program. Next week, we're going to look at some of San Francisco's famous painted ladies, as well as show you how you can use some of these designs in your own home. So, stay tuned. I understand there's also some great restaurants in town.
That's for sure. So, I've got a few in mind.
Well, what do you feel like having tonight? There are 2 things that most of us don't like about painting our homes. One is, we really don't like to work on a ladder. The second thing is, after we finish rolling the paint on the walls, our backs are killing us. Well, our backs hurt because we're constantly bending down and stretching to use the roller. Well, a company called Mr. Longarm has created a system that eliminates both of those problems. And the key to it is this fully adjustable pole. Now you can buy these as short as 2 or 3 feet, all the way up to 24 feet. Just buy the pole that's the right length for your wall height. You attach a roller on the end, and without having to bend over, you can paint from base to ceiling, and your back will love it. But its usefulness doesn't stop there, because there are a number of attachments that you can get for it. You can use an edge painter, you can use a corner painter. They even have a ceiling painter that comes equipped with a spatter guard. After you're done painting the house, you can also use a bulb changer for changing those hard to reach ceiling lights, and you can get a window cleaning kit. Well, I hope you can see that the whole system would be a lot of use around the house, so give it a try sometime. Tell you what, stay tuned, and next week I'll introduce you to another new product. In the meantime, I'll see you at the paint store.
Glenwood Sherry adds gentle guidance and a human touch to crackle finishes. The crackle finish adds beauty, charm, and character to even the plainest of rooms. This special technique VHS video cassette will guide you to new adventures in home decorating. Crackle Finishes is available for $24.95, or you can order a copy of today's show, number 208, for $15.95. Please add $3 shipping and handling for either videotape. Call 1-800-394-0050. Please specify Crackle Finishes Technique Tape or Show 208. fresh paint is made possible by Anchor Glass Container Corporation, a company committed to reusing a 100% recyclable product. Once you recycle a glass container, it returns as another glass container. Anchor Glass, we hold the world in our bottles.